My ex and I were locked in a bitter custody battle for our son in my first life. When the judge asked Leo where he wanted to live, he just sat there in silence, small shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the table like it might crack open and swallow him. But I could hear what he wouldn't say out loud, clear as if he'd whispered it straight into my ear. I want to be with Mom. I don't want to leave her. So I fought. I scraped. I begged the court to look past my thinner bank account and see the only thing that mattered. I loved my child with everything in me. I won custody. And then, not long after, my world collapsed. A report came in. An investigation. Officers at my door. Leo crying as if his heart had been wrung out. I want to live with Dad, he sobbed. Mommy hurts me. She won't let me. And there was evidence. Marks that made people's faces harden and their eyes turn cold, as if the verdict had already been written before I even opened my mouth. Mark, my ex, looked at me like I was something he'd never truly known. In court, his voice shook with rage. You stole him and then you do this? Are you even human? But beneath his fury, I heard something else. Something that didn't match his words at all. He wanted to be with me. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't defend myself against what everyone thought they saw. One accusation turned into another, and then into a judgment I couldn't outrun. I was sent away, not to prison, but to a place that felt like a quieter kind of disappearance. A locked ward. Endless evaluations. Years bleeding into years until my life became a hallway of fluorescent light and closed doors. I died there, still hearing my son's crying voice in my head. So when I opened my eyes again, reborn, with the weight of 2 lifetimes in my chest, I made a different choice. In my second life, when Mark and I divorced, I didn't fight for custody. I let Leo go with him. Even though I could hear Leo's thoughts again. I wish I could live with Mom. I don't want to leave her. I swallowed it. I told myself love meant letting go. I told myself it was better than the nightmare I'd lived before. Years passed. Then one night, Mark lay dying, too pale, too still, his voice barely more than breath. He grabbed my wrist like he was afraid I'd vanish. It was Leo, he rasped. It was our son. I froze. Mark's eyes were glassy with pain and terror. He made me sick. Slowly. On purpose. His mouth trembled. He said he just wanted to live with you. He hated me for taking him from you. My skin went cold. My throat closed. The room tilted. And then everything went dark. So now, here I was again. A third life. A third chance. And across the courtroom, Mark stood facing me, younger, unbroken, with the same sharp jaw and the same wary eyes. For a second, we just stared at each other like 2 people who'd woken from the same nightmare and recognized the other in the daylight. Between us sat Leo, 10 years old, legs too short for the chair, hands clenched in his lap. The judge leaned forward. Leo, he said gently, you understand why you're here, right? Can you tell me where you want to live? With your mother or your father? Leo bit his lip and said nothing. But his mind was loud. I wish I could live with Mom. I don't want to leave her. The familiar words struck me like a slap. The third time I'd heard them, and they still made my stomach twist. I looked into Leo's eyes, hopeful, pleading, and the words I wanted to say got stuck behind my teeth. Because in my first life, I'd promised the court I would dedicate myself to him completely. No remarriage. No other children. I'd poured every ounce of love and attention into him until there was nothing left of me. And what had it earned me? A life ruined by accusations I couldn't disprove. And my son's sobs, burning into my memory. I hate Mommy. I wanted to live with Dad from the start. But she wouldn't let me. The words flashed through me like ice water, and my body remembered what my mind still couldn't forgive. I couldn't do it again. I couldn't walk willingly back into that ending. So I turned my head away, pretending I couldn't see the way Leo's eyes followed me. The judge sighed, disappointed. If the child won't express a preference, the court will decide based on which parent can provide a more stable. No. Mark's voice thundered through the courtroom. The judge frowned. Mr. Hale? Mark forced himself to breathe, but his hands were shaking. I request a recess. 10 minutes. We need to discuss this privately. After a tense pause, the judge nodded. 10 minutes. The moment we were in the side room, Mark spun on me, eyes blazing. You've been reborn too, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Mark dragged a hand down his face and muttered a curse like it was the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. Last time. I heard Leo's thoughts. He wanted to live with me. He said you were mean to him. His voice tightened. That's why I fought so hard. My mouth went dry. What I heard was the opposite. Mark stared at me, confusion and dread twisting together. Then what is this? He whispered. What is he doing? He swallowed hard. Maybe you should take him, he said, voice strained. In my last life. He wanted you. He made me sick just to make it happen. A shiver ran down my spine, memory flashing, locked doors, bright lights, the slow erasure of my life. No, I said, firm. I have no desire to end up like last time. Mark looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Then who does he actually want? He demanded, voice cracking. He's 10. How could he hate us like that? I had no answer. The recess ended too quickly. Back in court, the judge adjusted his glasses, irritation plain. Even if you divorce, a minor requires a legal guardian. This is a parent's obligation. Anything else is abandonment. You must make a choice. Who will be the primary caregiver? Mark and I exchanged a look, two people standing on the edge of the same cliff, terrified that if we stepped wrong, we'd fall into lives we'd already lived. And then, like a wave crashing through my skull, I heard Leo again. Mommy, I choose you. I want to be with Mommy. My heart jolted. I shot a look at Mark. He was staring at me, eyes wide, face pale, like he'd just heard the exact opposite. We both turned toward Leo at the same time and spoke in the same breath. Leo, we said, who do you choose? Mom or Dad? Leo froze. His eyes flicked between us like a trapped animal. I softened my voice. Leo. You have to choose one of us. We won't be angry, no matter what you say. Mark nodded quickly. That's right. Just tell the truth. Leo's face flushed bright red. His lip trembled. Then he burst into tears. I don't want to choose, he sobbed. I want our family to stay together forever. The courtroom stirred with murmurs. What's wrong with them? Weren't they fighting over him a minute ago? Now it looks like neither of them wants him. Poor kid. Heat crawled up my neck. Judgment pressed in from every side. But when I looked at Leo, crumpled, tear-streaked, shaking with real fear, something inside me softened despite everything. Because no matter what my memories screamed, he was still my child. Mark and I requested a postponement. The judge granted it with a sharp warning and set the next hearing for 5 days later. 5 days. Reluctantly, we returned to the same house, two people who didn't trust each other anymore, living under one roof with a child who wanted us to pretend we were whole. That night, after Leo cried himself to sleep, Mark and I sat at the kitchen table like strangers. What if he still won't choose in 5 days? Mark asked, rubbing his temples. And what about what we hear? I said, voice low. I asked around. It seems we're the only two who can hear his thoughts. And we hear completely opposite things. Mark's jaw tightened. What's the point of this? He muttered. Who does he actually want to be with? Both our parents were gone. There was no aunt or uncle to pass him to. There was nowhere else for him to go. I thought of the Leo the first known, the sweet, attentive boy who wrote essays titled My Favorite Mom, who used to bring me dandelions like they were treasure. Who would believe that child could destroy my life? Just thinking about it made my chest ache. Then a thought hit me so sharply I sucked in a breath. I know who can help us, I said. The next morning, I called the school, excused Leo from class and took him to the hospital where my best friend, Linda Parker, worked. Linda had been my anchor for years, through the divorce, through the first hearing, through my second life's hollow peace. She'd held my hand when I shook. She told me I wasn't crazy when I said I could hear things no one else could. Mark leaned close as we walked down the corridor. Are you sure this will work? I don't know, I admitted. But we can't keep guessing. Linda led us into a quiet office and introduced us to a child psychologist, soft-spoken, calm-eyed. He uses guided hypnosis, Linda explained. It helps access what a child is truly holding inside. If this doesn't work, I don't know what will. I knelt beside Leo and squeezed his hand. Leo, sweetie, you're not in trouble. Just listen to the doctor, okay? Leo eyed the equipment warily. Mommy, I'm not sick, he whispered. I don't want to check up. I want to go home. His fear made my heart squeeze, but the ghosts of my past lives hardened my spine. Dad and I will be right here, I said, steadier than I felt. Be a good boy. With the doctor's gentle guidance, Leo's resistance faded. His breathing slowed. His eyelids fluttered and closed. The psychologist spoke softly. Leo, what is the one wish you want most in the world right now? Leo's eyes stayed closed. His voice came out thin and honest. I want my family to be together forever, he murmured. I don't want us to separate. Mark and I went still. The doctor continued. Can you tell me about your happiest memory? Describe it for me. A small smile touched Leo's lips. I was with Mom and Dad, he said. We went to the amusement park. My eyes burned. All this time, we'd been guarding ourselves, treating him like the monster from our memories. We hadn't stopped to think that he was 10, just 10, and his happiest moment was something simple and ordinary. Mark swallowed hard beside me. Then Leo added, dreamy and calm, Dad was wearing a suit. Mom was in a red dress. She had long curly hair. And she was so beautiful. Every muscle in my body locked. I looked at Mark. He looked at me. The same shock, the same fear, mirrored between us. Mark's voice came out as a strangled whisper. I was with you for over a decade. You've always had short hair. My tongue tasted like metal. My hands went cold. I hate long hair, I whispered. I've kept it short for years. If that was his happiest memory, then the mother in it wasn't me. But if it wasn't me? The room spun. Mark reached out, steadying my elbow as if he knew I was about to fall apart. Linda noticed immediately. She signaled the doctor to stop the session early, and within minutes Leo was awake, blinking sleepily, confused. Linda pulled me aside. Are you okay? Don't overthink it, she urged. Kids mix things up. He could have imagined it, or picked it up from a cartoon. I shook my head, breath unsteady. It was too specific. Mark's face had gone grim, like something hard was forming behind his eyes. I closed mine, made the decision, and opened them again. Linda, I said, voice trembling but certain, I need you to run a DNA test. For me, Mark, and Leo. Linda stared like I'd lost my mind. Are you serious? One sentence and you're questioning whether he's your son? Mark's jaw clenched. Yes, he said. We need to know. Linda's expression shifted, turning professional. Okay. I'll rush it. You'll have results this afternoon. Mark and I took Leo home, dread sitting heavy in our chests. Leo seemed fine. After dinner, he begged Mark to play video games, laughing like nothing in the world was wrong. While he was distracted, my fear pushed me into testing him. Leo, I said carefully, at the amusement park. The woman in the red dress with long curly hair. Who was she? Without looking up from the screen, he answered automatically. It was Mom. The second the words left his mouth, he froze like he'd stepped off a cliff. His fingers stopped moving. His eyes widened. My voice sharpened, panic breaking through. Leo. Think carefully. When have I ever had long hair? His face crumpled. He burst into tears. Mark rushed over and pulled me aside. Sophia, calm down, he hissed. You're scaring him. I knew I was spiraling, but after everything I'd lived through, how could I not? I dragged in a shaky breath. Then Leo's small, timid voice cut through the tension. Mommy. He was holding up a photo album, hands trembling. This is you, he whispered. With long hair. Don't you remember? I snatched the album, heart pounding, and then my eyes landed on the photo. My vision blurred instantly. Of course. It was his kindergarten graduation. The parents had been asked to dress as fairy tale characters. I'd worn a princess costume. And a long curly wig. Mark had been there too, in a suit. And afterward we'd promised Leo an amusement park trip. We went. But not long after we arrived, both Mark and I got urgent work calls. We left early. We promised the whole day and broke it. And somehow, for Leo, that half-finished trip had become the happiest moment of his life. Mark and I both stared at the photo like it was a confession. We were such failures. Then my phone rang. Linda. My hands shook as I answered. The results are in, she said. Sophia. He's yours. Both of yours. Over 99%. Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. After Leo went to bed, Mark's voice came thick and raw. We failed him, he said quietly. Maybe he was never trying to ruin us. Maybe he was just desperate to keep us from splitting up. I didn't answer, because the truth sat in my chest like a stone. No matter what, Leo was our son. And the idea of him becoming the person from my past lives, the child who could destroy us, felt unbearable. If a child goes wrong, people like to blame the child. But the truth is uglier. It starts with the parents. That night, Mark and I sat on the floor with the old photo albums spread between us. We turned pages in silence, Leo as a newborn, Leo learning to crawl, Leo wobbling on unsteady legs, Leo's first toothy grin. Moments we'd been too busy to fully live. For the first time in what felt like forever, the anger in the room loosened its grip. Until I turned to the next page. And something clicked so sharply it stole my breath. My hands began to shake. The album slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Mark looked up. What? I stared at the photos, horror creeping up my spine like ice. Because in the background, half out of frame, like an accident no one noticed at the time, was our housekeeper. Mrs. Carter. Not just standing there. Holding Leo the way I held him. Pressed close, protective, like she was shielding something precious. And beside her, farther back, was another face I knew too well. Linda. Smiling. Not at me. At Leo. Slowly, I lifted my eyes to Mark, my voice trembling. I don't think the person he wants to live with is you. Or me. Mark's brow furrowed, completely lost. What are you talking about? I didn't explain, not yet. I couldn't. Not with Leo asleep down the hall and the walls listening. But I knew something else now, too. In all three lives, the thoughts we heard were engineered to do one thing: split us apart, turn us into enemies, and trap us in a custody war that destroyed whoever won. If I was right, then the danger we'd been so focused on, the danger we thought lived inside our son, had been standing much closer to us all along. I think I know what's going on, I whispered. And if you don't want to end up like last time. I met his eyes, holding his gaze until he understood how serious I was. You need to trust me. Mark didn't speak for a long moment. His throat bobbed like he was swallowing down panic. Then he nodded once. Sharp. Reluctant. Tell me what to do. The next few days, we played a part so carefully it made my skin crawl. We took Leo to the amusement park, the one he'd held like treasure in his mind for years. We stayed the whole day. No work calls. No rushing. No half promises. Leo's cheeks went pink with joy, and he kept asking the same question like he couldn't believe it was real. Really? You're staying all day? You won't leave? We're staying, I promised, and this time I meant it. All day. Whatever you want. He laughed so hard he hiccuped. He ran ahead of us with sticky fingers and bright eyes and the kind of trust that broke me in two. And when we sat on a bench eating greasy fries and watching him spin on the carousel, I leaned toward Mark and asked softly if Mom and Dad didn't divorce. If we stayed together and did this all the time. Would you like that? Leo's smile faltered. Just for a heartbeat. Then he forced it back onto his face like a mask. Of course, he said quickly. That's my biggest wish. I want us to be together forever. But his eyes didn't match his words. Mark and I didn't react. We just exchanged a look, small, quiet confirmation. 2 days later, we were back in court. The judge looked tired before he even spoke. Have you reached an agreement? Mark stood. His voice was calm, almost warm. Your Honor, after careful consideration. For our son's well-being, Sophia and I have decided not to proceed with the divorce at this time. The courtroom stirred. The judge blinked. You are staying married? Mark nodded. For now. And then, mid-sentence, Mark's face twisted like he'd been stabbed by something invisible. His hand gripped the table. His breath hitched. At the exact same time, a shriek tore through my skull. Not outside. Inside. Mommy, help me. I don't want to live with Dad. Mommy, take me away. I saw Dad hugging a lady. He said he loves us, but he's lying. I snapped my head toward Leo. He was staring at me with wet eyes, his lower lip trembling, like he was begging me to save him from something he couldn't say out loud. But I wasn't fooled anymore. Because I could see the pattern. It was the same sharp, urgent thought that always arrived at the perfect moment, always crafted to ignite panic, anger, betrayal. And I knew, with a cold certainty that settled into my bones, that Mark was hearing something else entirely. I didn't ask him what it was. I didn't have to. The look on his face said everything: shock, humiliation, rage. Exactly what the thoughts were designed to provoke. I stood, my voice cutting through the air before Mark could say another word. No, I said. We're divorcing. Mark's head jerked toward me, eyes flaring, and I saw him catch himself, hold it down, because we'd promised each other we wouldn't explode. Not in front of everyone. Not anymore. The judge frowned. Which is it? We're divorcing, I repeated, steady now. And we've made a decision about custody. The courtroom leaned in. The judge's tone sharpened. Who will be the primary caregiver? I inhaled. And I made the choice that turned the entire room against me. Neither of us, I said. A wave of shocked noise rippled through the benches. Excuse me? The judge snapped. The whispers turned ugly fast. How can a mother say that? Look at that kid, he's terrified. 2 adults and neither wants him? I didn't flinch. I looked straight ahead and let my gaze travel through the room until it landed on the one person standing near the back, hands folded neatly in front of her like she belonged there. Mrs. Carter. Our housekeeper. She was in her 60s, gray hair pinned back, eyes watery with practiced softness. And when Leo saw her, he lurched forward like his body remembered safety before his brain could argue. Mrs. Carter, he whimpered, voice breaking. She stepped toward him instantly, arms opening without hesitation, and when he collapsed into her embrace, she rocked him like she'd done it 1,000 times. My stomach turned. Not because it was wrong for someone to comfort a child, but because it was too perfect. Too familiar. Too owned. I faced the judge again. Your Honor, I said evenly, my son has made his preference clear. The judge stared at me like I'd lost my mind. That woman is? Our housekeeper, I said. His choice is her. That's absurd, the judge snapped. Miss Hale, this is not a game. Today you and Mr. Hale must designate a legal guardian. That is your responsibility. I nodded once. Then ask him. Every head turned. Leo clung tighter to Mrs. Carter. His voice came out small, frantic. Mommy. Something sharp and tired rose in my chest, and I hated myself for it, but I said it anyway. Because I needed the truth more than I needed to be liked. Don't call me that, I said softly. If you don't want to live with me, then go where you want. I'll let you. Leo's face crumpled. He burst into panicked sobs that ripped through the courtroom. People started shouting. That's her child. Heartless. Disgusting. Mark stood stiff as stone beside me, and the fact that he didn't defend me made the crowd hate him too. Mrs. Carter hugged Leo tighter and murmured, It's okay, baby. Don't cry. Don't hurt your eyes. Baby. Not sweetie. Not kiddo. Baby. I watched Leo melt into her chest like he belonged there. And I knew I wasn't imagining it. So I stepped forward and asked the question that made the air go rigid. Leo, I said, voice calm, if you went with me and you could never see Mrs. Carter again, would you still choose me? He froze. His arms tightened around her neck so hard his knuckles went white. His eyes widened with pure, childlike terror. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The judge saw it. Everyone saw it. I turned back to the bench. Your Honor. That's his choice. Mark's voice joined mine, flat and controlled. I agree. The judge looked like he wanted to slam his gavel through the table. You cannot hand your child to hired help because you're uncomfortable being parents. That's when Linda stood up. I didn't look at her, but I felt her presence like a shadow shifting behind my shoulder. This is insane, Linda snapped, voice shaking with indignation. Sophia, what are you doing? You're really going to humiliate this woman and traumatize your own son because of one hypnosis session? I turned slowly. Linda's eyes were bright with anger and something else, fear, buried deep. I smiled, small and sharp. Linda, I said quietly, if everything is innocent, then you shouldn't mind one more test. The courtroom stilled. Linda's mouth tightened. What test? I looked at the judge. I'm requesting a DNA test between Mrs. Carter and Leo. A stunned silence. Then an explosion of noise. You can't do that. That's slander. Are you accusing the housekeeper of? Mrs. Carter staggered like she'd been slapped. No, she cried, shaking her head so hard her pinned hair loosened. No, no, no. I'm 60 years old. I can't be his mother. This is wicked. You're doing this because you're jealous he loves me. People nodded, eager for a villain that wasn't a child. She's just the nanny. She's the one raising him because his parents are absent. Rich people, always looking for someone to blame. Mark didn't move. His face was gray. Linda rushed toward the judge with a paper in her hand like she was saving the day. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. They already have a paternity report. She slammed it down on the clerk's desk. This proves Leo is theirs. I personally had it done by our hospital's lab. There's no need for more tests. The crowd murmured again, triumphant. See? The parents are just monsters. Mrs. Carter sobbed harder, shaking her head. I can't have children, she cried. I haven't been able to for decades. A doctor can prove it. I'm not his mother. I swear. I listened to all of it. And I didn't blink. Because I had never said Mrs. Carter was Leo's mother. Not once. Linda's chest rose and fell quickly, like she'd run too far too fast. I took one step toward her. Linda, I said softly, you're right about one thing. She lifted her chin, still performing righteous anger. Finally. I leaned in just enough for her to hear the truth inside the calm. Mrs. Carter isn't his mother, I whispered. Linda's eyes flickered. I straightened and raised my voice so the room could hear. She's not his mother. Because his mother is sitting right there. Every head turned back to Linda. Linda laughed, too loud, too sharp. That's not funny. My smile didn't move. Is it funnier, I asked, that you're handing out DNA reports like candy, but you're terrified of a new test? Linda's face strained. I'm not terrified. This is harassment. I looked at the judge again. Your Honor, I'm requesting a court-ordered retest. Right now. Fresh samples. Linda's voice cracked. No. Mark moved for the first time. He lifted his hand. And men I didn't recognize, hospital security, stepped forward at a signal Linda hadn't expected from him. Linda blinked, stunned. Mark? His voice was low. Do the test. Linda backed up instinctively, clutching Leo's old report like it was a shield. You can't, this is insane. I tilted my head. We're his legal parents on paper, I said. That means we get to request as many tests as we want. Linda's breath hitched. Her eyes darted toward Leo, still clinging to Mrs. Carter, trembling with confusion and fear, and something ugly hardened across Linda's mouth for half a second before she caught it. It was the first time her mask slipped. They took the samples. Leo cried and called out, Mommy. Over and over, reaching toward Linda. It should have broken me. In another life, it would've. But now, every time he said it, my mind whispered back, he's not calling you. The results came fast, because Linda worked there, because everything about this had been arranged for convenience. And when the lab tech handed the file to the judge's face changed in real time. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then something like anger so deep it turned his skin pale. He looked up. "Miss Hale," he said sharply, "Mr. Hale. The results indicate you are not biologically related to this child." The courtroom went dead. A second later, chaos erupted. What? That can't be true. Then who is he? Mark's hand found the back of my chair, steadying himself like the floor had tilted. I kept my eyes on Linda. Linda stood perfectly still, like her body had forgotten how to move. The judge's voice cut through the noise again. "Miss Parker," he said, staring at Linda, "you submitted a report earlier. Explain how that report could state otherwise." Linda's lips parted. No sound came out. I stepped closer. And I reached into my pocket, pulled out something tiny, and flicked it onto the table in front of her. A micro receiver. Barely bigger than a button. Linda's eyes snapped to it. And that was all I needed. "You've been wondering," I said quietly, "how I knew." Linda's throat worked. "Sophia, I don't know what you think." I cut her off. Only Mark and I could hear Leo's thoughts. And we heard opposite things. Perfect opposites. Custom made to make us hate each other. Mark's voice joined mine, hoarse. I heard that Sophia was cheating. That she was cruel. His jaw clenched hard. And she heard that I was cheating. That I was lying. That I was dangerous. Linda shook her head, eyes shining. "That's absurd." I leaned in. "You're a hypnotist, Linda. You've bragged about it 100 times. The subconscious is easier to steer than people want to admit. Remember?" Her face twitched. I reached into Mark's pocket, because he'd insisted we be thorough, and pulled out a small bundle of twisted remotes and transmitters we'd found hidden in a shoebox in the back of the closet, taped under old blankets like someone assumed we'd never look. I dropped them on the table too. The sound was small. But it landed like thunder. "You recorded phrases," I said, voice steady even as my heart tried to claw its way out of my ribs. "You played them while we slept. Repetition. Conditioning. Then during court, you triggered a frequency that made the receivers on us fire. And our brains, already primed, filled in the thoughts like they were real." Linda stared at the devices like they'd bitten her. Mark's voice went colder. "That's why only we could hear it." The judge's face had gone rigid. "Miss Parker." Linda's composure cracked. Her eyes shot to Mrs. Carter like a plea. Mrs. Carter let out a strangled sound and stumbled forward. "They're lying," she blurted, sobbing. "They're lying. They're rich, they're cruel." But her acting was sloppy now, frantic. And when Mark's phone buzzed, one message, one name, the last thread snapped. Mark looked at the screen. Then at me. Then at Linda. "They got him," Mark said quietly. Linda's head jerked up. "Who?" Mark's eyes were dead. "Your husband." Linda went white. Mrs. Carter let out a wail and lunged toward Leo, clutching him tighter. "Don't take my baby." "Baby." Again. The courtroom froze at the rawness of it. And then Linda did something that, in another life, I would have called impossible. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real one. It started small, then grew until it sounded like something breaking. "Of course you found it," she said, voice shaking with fury. "Of course you did." The judge slammed his gavel. "Miss Parker. You are under oath." Linda ignored him. She looked at me with pure, burning hatred. "Do you have any idea what it's like," she hissed, "to watch you have everything? The husband. The house. The job. The life. You worked hard, sure. You're so talented, Sophia. Everybody loves you. Everybody trusts you." Her eyes flicked to Mark, then back to me. "I wanted my son to have what your son would have," she said, voice rising. "The best schools. The best future. I wanted him to be safe. I wanted him to be somebody. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. My voice broke. You're saying? Linda's smile was cruel. Yes. We switched them. The room spun. Mark grabbed my elbow, but his grip was shaking too. Linda kept going, words pouring out like poison finally finding air. We knew you didn't have family, she snapped. I knew you in high school. I knew you were alone. Mark's parents were gone too. No one would notice if you disappeared. No one would protect you. I could barely breathe. Linda's voice turned bright and savage. I brought Mrs. Carter into your home first. My mother-in-law. Then my husband as your driver. You were surrounded. Watched. And when you got pregnant, I got pregnant too. Her eyes gleamed. And when you gave birth, we made one clean swap. Mark made a sound like he'd been punched. And then, Linda said, almost dreamy now, we just waited. We waited until the kid was old enough to be useful. My chest tightened painfully. 14, I whispered without thinking. Linda's eyes flashed. Exactly. Before a child hits 14, people excuse everything. He's just a kid. He doesn't understand. He didn't mean it. Her voice dropped. We didn't need him to understand. We needed him to follow directions. My whole body went cold. The first life. The accusations. The second life. Mark dying slowly, terrified, telling me it was our son. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. Linda watched my face and smiled like she was savoring it. You know what the best part is? She said softly. You raised him for 10 years. Fed him. Loved him. And when the time came, he did what we needed. Mark's breathing turned ragged, like he was fighting the urge to lunge across the table. I forced my voice to stay steady, even as my vision blurred. Where is my child? I demanded. Where is my son? Linda's smile widened. Safe, she said. Hidden. Because I'm not stupid. DNA exists. Tests exist. I kept your child alive because I might need him as leverage. Her eyes glittered. But you'll never touch him. The judge shouted orders. Officers moved. People screamed. Cameras flashed. Through it all, Leo, 10 years old, confused and sobbing, clung to Mrs. Carter and cried, Mommy. Mommy. And for the first time, I understood the deepest cruelty of it. He wasn't calling me. He was calling the woman who'd taught him who to trust. The woman who'd held him. Who'd told him what to say. Who'd made him believe his real parents were villains. A child shaped by adults into a weapon. Linda's husband was arrested. Mrs. Carter was dragged away screaming. Linda fought like a wild animal until they restrained her too. And Leo. Leo sat on the courtroom floor shaking, crying until he couldn't breathe, reaching out toward me with hands that didn't know who I was. I didn't go to him. Not then. Not after 3 lifetimes of devastation, 2 of them ending with bloodless horror and a child's voice haunting my skull. It wasn't because he didn't deserve compassion. It was because compassion was the exact thing Linda had used against me. Because I couldn't afford to be soft until my real child was safe. The case moved fast after that. The evidence was everywhere: devices, recordings, witness statements, medical reports, messages. Linda confessed in pieces and then tried to take it back. She blamed poverty. She blamed envy. She blamed me for existing. When they asked about the thoughts, Linda's mouth curled. It was easy, she said. You two were already frightened. Already tense. I just nudged you. A sound. A trigger. A word at the right moment. You did the rest yourselves. She wasn't wrong. That was the part that haunted me most. How close we'd come to destroying each other without her lifting a finger. Leo, Linda's biological son, was placed into the system. Neither Mark nor I fought for him. Not after what his family had done. Not after what he'd been taught to do. I told myself it was justice. I told myself it was survival. But at night, when the house was quiet, I still heard his sobs in my head like a bruise I couldn't stop touching. And through it all, one question chewed my soul to pieces. Where was my son? Linda refused to talk. Even after sentencing. Even after the doors closed. Even after she was medicated and monitored and stripped of every ounce of control. When the prosecutor pressed her, when detectives pleaded, when they offered deals, her smile returned, thin and vicious. "This is the one thing I have over you," she whispered. "I know who my son is. And you. You'll die never knowing where yours is." Mark had to physically hold me back when she said it. Because something in me snapped so violently I didn't recognize myself. But I also knew something else. Linda wouldn't destroy my child. Not fully. She needed him. A bargaining chip. A safety net. Proof. Leverage. That was the only reason I didn't lose my mind completely. Days passed. Then weeks. Every ring of the doorbell made my heart seize. Every unknown number made my hands shake. One afternoon, I stood at the front door with my fingers hovering over the keypad, afraid to hope again. Mark came up behind me and pressed his hand over mine. "Open it," he said, voice rough. "Whatever it is. We face it." I inhaled. And I opened the door. 2 officers stood on the porch. And between them, half hidden behind their legs, was a small boy. 7 or 8 years old. Too thin. Hair sun-lightened and messy. Eyes wide with cautious wonder. He peered up at me like he didn't know if I was real. And then, in a tiny voice that shattered the last walls inside my chest, he said, "Mom?" I didn't remember moving. One second I was standing there frozen, the next I was on my knees, pulling him into my arms so tightly I was terrified I'd hurt him. He smelled like dust and cheap soap and outside. He trembled. And then he relaxed into me like something inside him finally recognized home. I cried like I'd never cried in any lifetime. Not quiet tears. The kind that ripped out of you, the kind that left you shaking and empty and alive. Mark dropped beside us and wrapped his arms around both of us, his face buried in our son's hair like he couldn't breathe otherwise. That was the first time in 3 lives I felt the universe exhale. Later, after the officers left and our son was safe upstairs with blankets and warm food and a therapist's gentle voice on speakerphone, Mark and I sat in the dark kitchen and stared at the wall. "We were so close to ruining everything," he whispered. I nodded, throat raw. "And he was just a child," Mark said. "He was just a child." I thought of Leo, 10 years old, raised in our house, held in our arms, shaped in our absence, used as a blade before he even understood what a blade was. I thought of my first life's locked doors. My second life's deathbed confession. And my third life's courtroom where truth finally cracked the world open. "It won't happen again," I said, voice low and shaking with something harder than fear. Mark looked at me. I met his gaze, steady for the first time since I'd been reborn. "Not to our son," I said. "Not to us. Not ever again." And upstairs, in the room we'd painted years ago for a child who was stolen before we could even memorize his laugh, my real son slept under clean sheets, breathing evenly, safe, alive, home. For the first time, the sound in my head wasn't a weapon. It was silence. It was peace. And it felt like a third chance I wasn't going to waste.